Yesterday we talked about how to apply our heart appliques to the pockets, and then how to fold in the pocket for that shape that we will now stitch. You do not have to stitch this around the outer edges prior to applying it to the apron. Obviously that would give you 2 rows of stitching at that point. So all I plan to do is I'm going to do 2 rows of stitching across the top part of each of the 4 pocket pieces that I have. Let me read. I don't think the pattern calls for that. If I'm not mistaken, the pattern just simply says 1 row of stitching. Let's see. Okay, I'm reading. Okay, we're supposed to center, pin the pockets, stitch close to the sides and the lower edge. You know, honestly, there may be an omission because I don't see anything in here for view E. Then pin 1, right? Yeah, there's not any finishing information on the top part of the pocket. So if you're doing McCall's Fashion Accessories pattern number 2947, and you're working on the pockets, do not despair. Basically here, oh, I take that back. Back up. This is the kind of pocket where, and they've done this, yes, you actually are to stitch this down on the wrong side, or excuse me, the right sides of your fabric would be together, and then you flip it to the other side. And I elected not to do that type, but I will show it right here. It is step 1. They're very good. I honestly, it's my own fault here. So to ease in the fullness on the pockets with the curves, machine based 1/4 inch from the raw edge. That was something I was going to show you. I think we talked about that yesterday, about doing a baste along this lower edge to kind of get that curve in the bottom section of these rounded pockets. And that is absolutely the best way to do that. I've basically just kind of folded mine and pressed. But we all know how I am about patterns. So anyway, across this top edge here, and I'm going to try to hold this still, and I'll read that to you. It says, turn upper edge of pocket to the outside on the hemline. Starting at the hem, fold, and that is marked on the pocket piece. Stitch around the raw edge, 5/8 of an inch from the edge. So that would be from the raw edge toward the inside part of the pocket. Starting at the hem fold, stitch around the raw edge 5/8 from the edge. To ease in the fullness on the pockets with curves, which would be view E, machine based 1/4 of an inch from the raw edge. Now when they say machine based, they mean really open up that stitch length, because you're going to want to pull that out. To ease, oh, we already read that part. Okay, cut the upper corners diagonally. Turn the hem to the inside, and you can see that on the photo, or not the photo, the drawing. Okay, and then continuing to turn under the raw edge along the stitching line, pulling up the basting thread to ease in the fullness along the pocket with curves. For pockets with curves, cut the seam allowances to 1/4 of an inch, and that would be the finishing step right there. So you'd have your top edge folded and turned to the inside, and then all of that around the outer edges would be pulled in. You've not stitched anything yet. You're just doing a basting stitch, okay? But I'm not doing my pockets that way, and I'll just, I'll show you how I plan to do the pocket, And then you, of course, could choose the method that you prefer. I'm now getting up the 2 pieces of fabric that I have for the front. There's one, and I need to turn on my iron. Okay. So what I'm going to do is take 2 pockets, and I'm going to mark on the front skirt of the pattern piece where these 2 pockets will go. And then we're going to stitch them here at the sewing machine. I'm just trying to decide. I think today, since I'm a little bit pressed for time, I won't bring the camera over, but because I'm doing 2 of these aprons, it would be really easy to show you on the second one. If you're not sure how to mark where the pockets go, I can tell you that. So I'm looking at this piece of fabric. I've cut it out of pattern piece number 4, and as it suggests right here, I've cut that on the fold. So it says center front, place on fold. So you end up with one piece of fabric that's twice this wide right here. Let me get this where you can see what I'm talking about. So there's all the width right there. So obviously this here is where the pocket will be placed. One on this side and one all the way over here on the other side. And the way you mark it is by putting this piece of pattern on each side of the skirt. So I'm going to take the fabric piece, lay the pattern piece on, making sure, of course, that the fold of the fabric is on the fold of the pattern so that I'm not out on the wrong side when I mark this. I'm using a heat erase pen, and I'm just going to make an X at the upper 2 lines where the pocket will go, and the lower 2 bottom edges, so I know I'm in the right vicinity with my pocket, and then I'm going to pin it in place. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why I really like these heat erase pens. They're so easy to work with. That might be, you know, a good Christmas gift if you don't have one or you don't have any. You could maybe ask. Okay. All right, so before I actually pin these down, I do have to stitch across the top, and I'm going to do that right now on all the 4 pockets. Whoopsie. I will move you over here. Okay. Where you can't see my sewing machine. That's nice. I'm sure that's extremely helpful. See how that looks. Okay. Alrighty. And I have the same color thread in both the top, in my needle and in my bobbin. I'm going to set my machine on just a straight stitch, the basic default, with the needle down. And because it's a pocket, and they do tend to get a little bit extra wear and tear, I am going to lock stitch. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I'm going to go all the way across. And I'm just using my sewing machine foot as the first marker for my seam allowance on the top edge of this pocket. And also, I want to make sure that this corner is in. That is the reason that they have you do this pocket that way. But I prefer doing it this way. So I'm just gonna, using a straight pin, I'm just gonna push those little tails from the folded over edge underneath. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, I kind of went back one extra, but that's okay. Now I'm leaving my machine needle down. I'm going to raise my foot and I'm going to turn the pocket and I'm going to raise up the needle, raise up the foot, and then lower the needle. It's a little extra step, but I'm weird that way. And I'm going to let the edge of this foot ride along this line of stitching. And it's not for any particular reason. It's just because that's the way I'm marked. That's what I'm using as my mark. If you're more comfortable having a different way of doing that, by all means. If you're following along with my stitching here. Now before I get to the end, I want to make sure that this little piece of fabric from the fold is also captured inside. So I just push it in. Some sewers will use a stiletto for that, which is absolutely acceptable. I've just always used a pin because I find that they're more handy. I don't have to look for them. Okay. Alright. That is still not captured, so I'm going to do a third row. That's what I love about this fabric. I think it lends itself well to all these little extra stitches, which is one of the things that I was excited about when I purchased the pattern. And it is an extra amount of thread, but at the same time, I just think it's super cute. I like the way that looks. So if you recall yesterday, I was explaining I don't know how to pause the videos. I will try to take care of some of this extra footage through editing, but I'm still learning how to do that. Yeah, I think my bobbin thread broke, so hey, good timing. We needed to have a chat about that anyway. Yep, I have a nest, and I had a feeling that that was going to happen because even though I have cleaned my machine several times, I'm working with flannel, and flannel has a huge propensity to create lint. So what I recommend is that you just go ahead and pull out the stitches if this happens to you. Just do the best you can. If you feel like you're going to lose your patience and start, you know, just screaming and yelling, which, hey, I've been there. You know, and as my mom used to say, she was so funny. She would say, I have so many projects just balled up in the bottom of my closet because something happened. So we called them ball ups if it was in the bottom of her closet. She wouldn't throw them away. She would just get, you know, to the point where she couldn't figure out what she wanted to do. She was an amazing seamstress. Gosh, some of the things that she made were just delicious. But anyway, I don't know why I jumped off on that tangent. However, I wanted to say that if that happens, the very, very first thing that I do is I check to make sure that my bobbin is correctly threaded and at the proper tension. And if I can, if I can get my bobbin to drop just a little bit, also it has to be going clockwise. There are videos out there that will show you why that's important. I don't know the legality of linking one, so if you just look up demonstration on a sewing machine needle and bobbin thread, you will see what I'm talking about with that locking thread. So anyway, so the next thing I'm going to do after I have checked on this bobbin is I'm going to clean out the bobbin case area and the bobbin hook area. And I know that many of you probably have sewing machines that are quite a bit newer than my Bernina 1080. And I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that the newer sewing machines no longer use a hook for the bobbin to sit in. And if that's true, then you won't have that extra step of cleaning all around with the little paintbrush, getting all this icky, you know, fabric lint and thread lint and basic dirt and grime. So I pull it as much as I can with a very soft paintbrush. If you have a clean makeup brush, they're oftentimes about as soft as you want one for this job. Then I clean this, make sure that the feed dogs, excuse me, I had to drop those. Okay. Excuse me, pull this out, and look at that. Do you see this? This is like the Mount Vesuvius of lint, and I just did this. Oh, I want that to come out so bad. It's huge. And, you know, amazingly, whoops, I think I'm going to use a pen and see if I can't pull that out. It's just a mass of lint. You see? That is what you get from just one or two stitchings, a couple of little pockets. That's why it's so important to make sure that your machine is clean, because you're going to get broken thread, you're going to get nesting, you're just going to get all sorts of little evils when you sew, especially with a linty fabric like flannel. And broken thread is your sewing machine's way of saying help. So take it seriously. Don't just fix the thread and keep going. You'll be sorry. Okay, there's another piece down in there. I probably should turn it off. Sometimes I can get it from back here. I think I've said this before, but don't be tempted to take that hook out. If you can't get to the lint, then maybe you should take your machine to the repair shop or somewhere to clean it. Ah, there it goes. Okay. But if you take the hook out, you will spend several hours, if not days, trying to put it back in. That's all I can say on that. I will say personal experience here. I believe we've talked about that before. I need to tip my machine back just to make sure that I've gotten. And as you can see, I mean, it takes a lot of care. We require so much from these machines, and all they ask in return is that we keep them clean and running smoothly. And I don't think it's too much. for all they do. I'm still getting a lot of lint. I guess today's sewing is, let's all watch this obsessively weird lady clean her sewing machine. Okay, well, I believe that is it. So now, oh, no it's not. I see a big gob. And it is one of the things that happens when you sew with flannel. That was resting on the back edge of the feed dog, and there's another one right there. And as you can see, using a straight pin, I just picked them right off. I may have missed those two little lovelies the first time, which that could be why my thread in my bobbin didn't last like it should have. Okay, here we go. And if you have a 1080 and you've never removed this throat plate here, the way you do that is you drop the feed dogs, which is that little dial on the side of your machine. Then you take it off and then you put it back on. It will fit perfectly. You'll hear it. Then you put the feed dog back and you step on your pedal, and that raises them back up to where they're supposed to be. Okay. All right, George. Let's see what happens now. So we're going to redo the bobbin. Oh, my thread just unthreaded itself. Well, I'm having one of those days. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. All right. So to thread the sewing machine, the way I do it, I do not wet the end of this thread, and I do not wet my fingertips. I just run my finger down the needle to remove static. Then I just aim for the eye, and you guys, you know I'm blind. I mean, I'm not trying to use that term lightly. I have a very hard time seeing. I do have to wear glasses all the time. So if I can do this, it's not a self-threading sewing machine. I know there are those out there. I don't have one. But if I remove the static from the needle and I just aim for the eye, it will take care of itself. That's been what's happened over and over again for years. Okay. Oh, something is going on. Okay, if it's going to happen today, evidently it's happening today. We are going clockwise. All right. Here we go. All right. I guess George just wanted everybody to have a little extra lesson in how to take care of a sewing machine. There's a little bit of lint up here. I'm just going to suggest that this particular flannel is extremely linty. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, we're going to try this again. Okay. And everybody cross your fingers. Oh, I just feel like giggling. It's just too funny. The appliques are very stiff and will have a tendency to kind of determine where you're going with your stitching. So you might want to roll it and pin it or clip it out of the way. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Just kind of grab a clip or a pin and just do that. What's happening here? Oh, it's stuck on itself. Oh my goodness. Okay, there we go. Now I have to back up and find out exactly where I was. Okay. Gosh. Wow. I forgot to, I'm going to have to work on this pocket. I was so busy trying to pay attention to what was happening to George that I kind of left this little edge here sticking out. I don't know if it's going to be obvious. Oh yeah, I'm going to have to redo this one. Okay, so now starting fresh with a new pocket and hopefully no worries. But little mistakes like that can happen. You just have to, you know, kind of decide, am I going to let it wreck my day? No, you're not. Sewing is fun. Okay, now I'm going to take my pen, make sure that all the extra fabric coming off the end of this pocket top is lined up straight and pretty. Okay, I'm using the side of the foot as my guide on my stitching line. This is going to get clipped out of the way. Make sure that is back where it's supposed to be. Using the foot on this side now as the guide for my seam allowance. And I'll stitch. The third row. Okay, so there's two pockets that are ready. And this one. Oh, for some reason that really freaked me out. Oh, I'm just second guessing myself now. Okay. Lock those stitches in place using the foot as my guide. Before I get to the end, I'm going to double check to make sure that this edge is lined up the way I want it to be, and it is. Back stitch. And the only reason I'm doing it this way is because I don't want to have to cut my thread. I don't want to pull this out, cut the thread, and then put it back in. So I'm just kind of using that technique to turn my sewing around. It's kind of chain stitching, but not really chain stitching. Stitch, forward stitch to lock everything in place, lift up the needle and the foot, turn, and then go back down for the third row using the edge of my foot and this line of stitching as my guide. Okay, that third row does not have to be a lock stitch. I mean, you're at that point by the time you get to the end there, you're pretty much locked in place. Okay, I'm trimming off all the extra thread, making everything nice and neat. Okay, so I have a set here that is complete. This one is really messed up. As you can see right here, because I didn't have this pinned out of the way when it was in here, it caused my sewing to push out of the way, and I got that big gap right there, so that's awful. And then these stitches are obviously far too close together right here. That's just as ugly as it can be. And on the back, it came off of my fold. So that bottom row and part of this row right here will all have to be ripped out before I'm happy enough to use this as a pocket. So that's fine. I have two for the project, the apron that I am currently working on, and I'm going to go ahead and pin these pockets into the position that they're supposed to be on the front part of the front skirt. So sorry. I'll be right back. Remember, I don't know how to pause yet, so unless I can edit this out, you may want to just fast forward at this point. I've already marked this side, so all I need to do is pin. There we go. And keep in mind that your pattern piece, you know, it may be slightly different than your pocket. When you're shaping a pocket using curves like these pockets have, you know, each pocket will be slightly different. It's going to be very hard to get them both identical. There may be slight differences, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So just kind of be willing to forgive yourself if there are, and you know, determine how much it means to you that they're both the exact same, or if there can be slight differences. Oh, and also don't forget as well that you don't have to put two pockets on your apron. You can put one, you can put none, whatever you choose to do, because you are making the apron. You can put a pocket that doesn't even have an applique on it if you want to. You can embellish your pocket with lace all the way around the edges. You could do a pocket that has shadow embroidery on it, or crewel embroidery, or it's just buttons. However you want to do it, whatever makes your heart sing in this little project. Okay. I'm almost done with one pocket, and I will go ahead and get the other one pinned. There, okay. That is adorable. Okay, so the second pocket I need to mark with the pattern piece. And this piece of fabric was folded in half, so I know where my fold line is. All I have to do is put this pattern piece down with the fold line along the fabric fold there, and align it with the top of the gathering edge where the waistline is. Just like I did for the first pocket, so that I know, at least in my case, I want them to both be in the same place on the front of the skirt. And I am using a heat erase pen, kind of in the same color family. I mean, I know it's going to disappear because I tested it before I started sewing. I might have mentioned that. I typically try to test the heat erase pen, if that's what I plan to use, on the fabric that I'm going to be sewing, because I don't want to have a problem. And it has been in the past. I've run across some heat erase ink that just does not erase well on certain fabrics. which I think is kind of odd, but it is honest to goodness the truth. And it seems to be mainly the finer cotton pieces of fabric that I seem to have that issue with. Oh, this is going to drive me crazy. The bottom edge of my pockets are not identical. So I'm having to make them identical by folding them in half, matching them up, and then I'll hit it with the iron. And that should work just fine. Okay. Yep. Okay. Of course, I have to be careful. I don't want to erase my pocket marking. That would not be good. Okay, and then just put in as many pins to hold that pocket in place that you feel you need, you know, for your own comfort. I try to keep them outside of my stitching